I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Omni at the Movies, where it's finally time to talk about certainly my most anticipated film of the year, Jurassic World Dominion. The final film of the Jurassic series, at least that's how it's being advertised, you never know what the future holds, but right now it's being billed as the conclusion. And now it's time to determine whether or not that conclusion was worth waiting for. Personally, I just got back from it, and while I certainly recognize that it does have its issues, overall, I think this is a good way to conclude everything. I thought this was a good film. Now, because this caveat is always required, no, it is not as good as the first Jurassic Park. None of the sequels have been as good as the first Jurassic Park, and we just have to live with that fact. And yet, even with that in mind, I still had a good time watching this movie. Now, when I made the Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom video, which if you haven't seen that yet, follow the links and go watch it, what I said at the end was that Fallen Kingdom was a potential game changer for the entire Jurassic series, but part of that was up to Dominion. By that I meant that Fallen Kingdom had ended in such a way that there was no possible way any sequel would be like what came before. The Jurassic Park movies had kind of fallen into a routine of always having the characters go to the island where they encounter the dinosaurs, and for some reason there are always dinosaurs there that weren't there before, and every time it ends, the characters are able to leave the island, everything stays contained there, or if something gets out, it gets shipped back, and nothing much changes at that point. But Fallen Kingdom ended with the dinosaurs being spread out into the wild or taken by people to specific locations. Now the dinosaurs were back in the world. And that was something that could not be undone. You can't just say, no wait, we were going to put them all back onto an island, or at the very least, you should not do that. There was always the potential that this movie could just hit the reset button and say, whoops, everything's on an island once more, all the dinosaurs were rounded up off screen. I was potentially worried that that would happen, and did it? Well, I don't want to go into spoilers here. I don't usually do spoilers unless the movie is like so terrible that I just don't care about spoiling it. I try to avoid spoilers in these videos. Tell you what, I'll make a spoiler video for after opening weekend. But for now, no spoilers in this video. I will say though that they did commit to it. They did still find a way to sort of have things go back to an isolated region. Not an island, but something that may as well be an island, and that is where most of the action takes place. But even then, it's not like the islands we've seen before. Even then, it's still different. But for the most part, they do really commit to the idea that the dinosaurs are just out in the world now. They are back, they are part of the environment, and that's just the way it is. And the movie takes the opportunity to explore at least some of the ramifications here, and it paints an interesting picture. It's a world that's adjusting. It hasn't been thrown into full chaos just yet, though there is something that happens that does get the plot rolling in that direction. But with the dinosaurs back, things are in a state of flux. Some places have adapted pretty well. Other places are kind of struggling to properly adapt. Some places seem like they were barely affected at all. It paints a pretty good picture of what the world looks like now that the dinosaurs have returned and expanded their horizons beyond just 1 or 2 little islands. So That part was good. It's not like it was a Tolkien-esque exercise in world building, but it had just enough to give you an idea. And from there, the plot does take a new direction. There's more to it. In fact, it's not even just one plot, it's actually two plots. Which brings me to another thing I actually enjoyed and was surprised by: how the returning cast members from the original film were treated. Now, as you know, Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ian Malcolm, as well as Henry Wu again, are all back for this movie. Henry Wu's character has been back since Jurassic World, but Grant, Sattler, Malcolm, the holy trinity, if you will, of human characters from that original film, are back. And when I did my reaction to that first trailer, I said it did look like they were taking the opportunity to put them all on screen together, at least at some point in the movie, but the big question was how big a part they were actually going to play. After all, these past few years, we've seen quite a few film franchises do that exact same thing to varying degrees of success. In Disney Star Wars, for example, they never took the opportunity to put Han, Leia, Luke, and Chewie all together in one scene again, because they decided to kill Han Solo before that could happen, and then Carrie Fisher died in real life before they could film the final movie, and it was all just a mess. The opportunity was missed, and fans were disappointed by that. Even some of the actors who worked in those movies were disappointed by it. On the other hand, you have something like Ghostbusters Afterlife, which did bring back the surviving three Ghostbusters all together for one scene, and CGI'd in the fourth, who was sadly no longer with us. But that was like at the very end of the movie. Even though it was the crowd-pleasing moment, it was at the finale. They didn't really do anything with it prior to then. They were focusing on the new characters. Not that that's a bad thing, but still, there was that sense that they were sort of thrown in at the very end. Well, not thrown in. It was made... We can talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife another time. So the question was, what would Dominion do? And I was actually surprised by how Grant, Sattler, and Malcolm carry half of the plot. There are two plots running parallel through this movie. One featuring the OG cast, one featuring the newer cast, and at some point you know they are going to intersect. The question is when and what will happen when they do. And watching that happen, it actually is pretty interesting. I will say all the performances are good across the board, but Sam Neill isn't even trying to hide his accent anymore in this movie. First couple appearances as Grant, he was at least trying to sound like he was an American paleontologist. He's apparently done doing that in this movie. Not that he's phoning it in, but he's just not hiding his accent anymore. That was something I noticed. But anyway, that's beside the point. When we actually do have them interacting, it's treated very well. Like, these are the characters who were in that movie that everybody loves, meeting the new characters from the movies that people are kind of split on, and when they're interacting, there's a sort of mutual respect at play, but also a little bit of self-awareness. Like, all the characters, once they're out of danger and they finally have a moment to actually take a breath and realize, oh, you're so-and-so, yes, and you're so-and-so. And they have that moment. There is a quick little bit in there where Ian Malcolm says, oh, you were in Jurassic World? Yeah, I'm not a fan. That got a chuckle from the audience when I was in the theater. And I think that's Colin Trevorrow sort of letting the audience know that he's not necessarily all that bothered by how his movies have not been as universally accepted as the first one. Unless there's some sort of Twitter rant or something that I don't know about, it seems like that's his way of saying he's just taking it in stride. We all like the first movie. There's no reason you can't like the old movies and the new movies, but if you're not, hey, I'm still making a Jurassic Park movie, so I'm good with it. That's the way it came across anyway, and I think that was a good way to do it. That sort of was like letting the audience know no hard feelings, regardless of what you think of the previous two Jurassic World films. So I guess if nothing else, Jurassic World Dominion is keeping it classy. And as for how those plots play out, as they're running parallel, I suppose it was good that they actually had those two plots, because on their own, I don't necessarily know if they would have been enough to carry a movie by themselves. Maybe they could have. They would have needed to be expanded quite a bit, but running side by side and eventually coming to intersect, and it's not like you're watching two completely different movies, mind you. You know that this is all building towards something. Eventually there's going to be an intersection. But having that the way it goes, I think it worked. Again, something that hadn't really been done in the previous Jurassic movies before. You kinda had it in The Lost World, but not really. So Dominion did a good job balancing it, for the most part. Now, when I say for the most part, I do acknowledge that there are some issues, particularly the stuff involving Owen and Claire, where they're going, no spoilers, I guess, but like, on their particular journey, there are moments where it feels like either certain things are forgotten or certain things are in and out so quickly that by the time the credits roll, you might have actually forgotten they happened at all. Again, I don't want to really get into spoilers, but like, there are some dangling parts in there. And there's a particular moment where the villain, I'll get to him in a moment, but like, where it feels kind of like the villain was actually openly asking why a certain action was being taken, as if he's pointing out that there's a tiny bit of a plot hole in the story. That kind of stood out to me. Not that it can't be rationalized, I don't think, but, you know, it is going to have some writing issues. So I just don't think those writing issues were enough to completely derail the movie, in this case at least. Since I brought him up, and this is the closest I will come to doing a spoiler, but you find this out like 10 seconds into the movie's runtime, Dodson is back. Dodson, we've got Dodson here in this movie. Yeah, he came back. He's the guy, in case you forgot, who met with Dennis Nedry in the first movie, giving him the instructions to get the DNA samples for Biosyn. He's the main human antagonist here. And it's kind of interesting to see, because, like, as opposed to the sort of shifty, trying to be inconspicuous guy who just appears for one scene in the first movie, here he's reimagined as sort of a Steve Jobs, Bill Gates character. And especially in light of recent news / conspiracy theories, depending on who you ask, surrounding Bill Gates and the way he's interacting with global events. Yeah, it's very interesting to see where that goes. I don't necessarily know if they had that in mind, because this movie was being written before that stuff started getting more and more attention. But watching it this year and knowing those stories, and whether or not they're true doesn't really matter because they still exist, it was interesting. Let me just say that. It was really, really interesting to see that particular element. And of course, we must not forget about the dinosaurs. Now, when I did my response to that first trailer, and also did it in subsequent videos that I know quite a few of you don't seem to like, but we'll set that aside for now, I pointed out that when a lot of people were talking about scenes from the trailers that were saying stuff like, wait a minute, that's inaccurate, that's inaccurate, that's inaccurate, I looked at some of those scenes and I was like, we're missing the context in these bits. This is a trailer. They arrange the clips out of order so that you can have a particular flow to it, and they want to show you the really interesting stuff that will get you intrigued and going to the theater to see what the context is. So if we don't know the context, maybe the scene isn't as inaccurate as you might think. For example, I speculated that the Parasaurolophus herd running through the snow, I saw a lot of people saying they shouldn't be running through the snow, they would freeze to death out there. My thought was, well, maybe they're not supposed to be there, and the reason Owen and his cowboy crew are riding after them on horseback is because they're trying to round them up and get them to a safer location where they won't freeze. I was right. That is exactly what they are doing. Again, happens early in the film. It's not a spoiler. You saw it in the trailer. You could probably guess it anyway. But yeah, context matters. Context really does matter in this case. And, well, a lot of those initial complaints that people were saying made no sense actually do kind of make sense. That being said, if you're a paleo bro watching this, I'm pretty sure this movie will tick you off because it's still not going for scientific accuracy. In fact, the final dinosaur moment in the movie, not the final thing, but like the centerpiece, if you will, the dinosaur battle that draws everything to its final climax before things can sort of wind down and we get our epilogue coda moment. It contains some stuff in there that even I was thinking, well, that's a bit more Godzilla than it is Jurassic Park. But even so, like, as dinosaur fights go, they were still kind of satisfying, even if they were kind of weird. Why are those moments in there? Well, I guess they probably figured it's the last movie. What are they going to do? Cancel our sequel? So, yeah, the dinosaurs, the context does explain quite a bit of what people were initially concerned about in the trailers. Some stuff is just done because they're aiming for being cinematic, and the rest of the time, they're dinosaurs. Wow, enough. And I should probably mention the fan service, because all of the Jurassic World movies have had Jurassic Park fan service in them at some point. Not the anime kind, get your mind out of the gutter. I'm talking about like references, callbacks to those original movies. There is some in Dominion, but I actually think it was handled just a little bit better than in the other two movies. Like Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom lay the nostalgia and the callbacks on really, really thick. Even I, as someone who has openly defended those movies, think they laid it on really, really thick. Like, I like butter on my toast, but if there's this much of a layer of butter on there, that's too much. Here, though, it's handled a little better for the most part. Like, it really depends on what it is. Again, no spoilers, but like, some of the moments I was like, oh, I see what they did there. Well played, movie, well played. And other times I was thinking, oh, I recognize that, but what's it doing there? Don't tell me it's explained in the viral marketing. I hate when movies do that. So it's kind of a flip of the coin, if you will, how the fan service is handled. There's not as much of it, unless of course you count the bringing back of those original 3 cast members as fan service, which, given the role they play, I don't think that would be the case. But in terms of the little things, like I said, some of it works better than others, but there's not as much of it, and it's not nearly as in your face. Now the ultimate question, which will be very hard to talk about without spoiling anything, but I'm gonna stick to it. The question of how this works as a conclusion. Because again, this is being billed as the final film. That could change. I'm filming this on a Thursday night and posting it on a Friday. They could easily announce mere hours after this goes up, or even before it goes up, that they're already in talks for making Jurassic Park 7. In fact, I even think that somebody up in the Universal hierarchy said that after opening weekend, everyone's going to sit down and discuss what the next step is. But just for now, let's assume that they're not lying to us and that Jurassic World Dominion really is the end. This is the final chapter. After this, there's either not going to be any more, or they're going to at least wait a few years before making another. Is it a good conclusion? That's the first question. And maybe it's not like the greatest conclusion we could get, but it is a satisfying conclusion all the same. This is a good way to end it. When you leave the theater, at least when I left the theater, it felt like you could stop here. Not that there's no potential for other stories with the way it ends, but again, no spoilers. The potential for other kinds of stories could still be there, but you don't need any more. It's reached a point where you can sit back and go, yeah, the ride is over, and what a ride it was. Or, if you prefer, yeah, the ride is over, that's a bunch of time I'll never get back. I don't know. I don't know what all of you think about these movies. Well, some of you. But point is, it feels like a good place to stop. And honestly, I think maybe it should stop here. Even speaking as someone who has advocated for the idea of something like the MonsterVerse continuing after Godzilla vs. Kong, which I turned out to be right in predicting, I still feel like not everything has to last forever. Let's not forget that there are many, many, many long-running film series that didn't get a chance to properly end because people lost interest before that could happen, and instead of getting to make a conclusion, they just sort of petered out and everyone just sort of stopped caring. In fact, that's how the Jurassic Park movies were for a while. Jurassic Park 3 was not supposed to be the last Jurassic Park movie, but for a long time it was, because it was just that bad. And it didn't really feel like it was a conclusion. It ended with a cliffhanger of sorts, one that, as far as I can tell, was never actually followed up on. Unless, of course, it was in the viral marketing. I know someone's going to point that out if it is. But whatever the case, Jurassic Park 3 just sort of caused that sort of thing, and it's actually surprising that Jurassic World was able to bring it back. And thus it provided the opportunity to actually have a proper conclusion, which not many film series actually get to do. Well, then again, there are some film series that do reach their endings and yet decide to keep going anyway, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when Endgame could have easily been the last movie, but they were like, no, we want more money, let's keep going. Or back in the 60s when Toho made Destroy All Monsters, that was supposed to be their last Godzilla movie, last movie for a lot of their kaiju in fact, but they kept going anyway. There are plenty of other examples, of course, but it honestly feels like the only film series that actually do end are the ones that are based on books that ended. Like The Hunger Games, for example, or Harry Potter, at least until all that other Wizarding World stuff wound up happening. But look at how that's turning out. Honestly, the crazy thing about Dominion is that it actually brought the Jurassic Park franchise from being one of those series that just sort of fizzled out to being a series that actually got to reach an end point. And I feel like if they were to continue right away, that would diminish it somehow. I don't doubt that, like, in another 10 years or so, we might hear rumors of a Jurassic Park 7, or maybe a Jurassic Park reboot even, or something down the line. But in terms of this current batch of movies, I feel like we've gotten a complete story. So what was once a film series that started strong and then fizzled out before it could really go anywhere has now become a film series that started strong and had its ups and downs, but finally reached its end point. And I don't think we should detract from that. Granted, that requires Universal to become the first movie studio in the modern era to decide that they actually don't want more money from a successful franchise. But who knows? It could happen. It's unlikely, but it could happen. That is at least my advice. If anyone from Universal is watching this, let Jurassic Park sit where it is for now. You reached your ending. It's an ending that I think is satisfying, and I bet a lot of people will think it's satisfying as well. But you don't need to do more. Maybe one day audiences will come back and say, you know what, we would like a little more after all. But for now, I think it's okay to just let this one be. Move on to other things. It's not like you don't have options. Anyway, my ultimate conclusion is that while flawed, like the other movies have been, Jurassic World Dominion is a good time at the movies. It's fun, it's a little weird at times, but it's classy, it's got respect for the audience and for the legacy, and it reaches a good conclusion both for itself and for the series as a whole. It'll be interesting to delve deeper into it because there is stuff beneath the surface, but I'm going to need quite a few more views of it before I can really delve into those. Plus, you know, like I said, no spoilers. So, with all of that said, I open the floor to you guys if you've seen it. And again, don't post spoilers down there either. I will get to a spoiler video. I know I've said that in the past and never have with certain movies, but I do intend to discuss spoilers for this one. So, for now, just share your thoughts on it in general. That's what I've done, and that's all I can say for now without getting into the nitty-gritty details. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books: Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.